Language. We all have it, excluding the recently born and the unfortunate few who have suffered and still suffer neurological damage, even though one could argue that even these people have language to some extent. We humans use language to both think and communicate, and we acquire this skill at a relatively young age. Without language, I could not explicate anything to you. In this video, I will attempt to convince you that language is by its nature vague, cannot reflect reality directly, and that understanding what someone means perfectly when they use language is impossible. The purpose of this video is not to stop you from ever using language again, far from it. The purpose of this video is to offer a perspective that helps you express yourself clearly and understand others better in all situations that require language, be it an everyday morning discussion with a loved one, an important academic debate, or a political discussion on stage. All situations that require language are prone to giving rise to misunderstandings, and I contend that this is largely a semantic problem. Without further ado, let's begin. What is language? In line with the intention of this video, I will provide you with a definition. As with all definitions, you can agree or disagree with my definition, but for the sake of effective communication, bear with it for now. I define language as a symbolic system used to denote perceived, thought, or felt meaning for oneself or another person. As some of you might realize, the word meaning is crucial if one wants to understand this definition of language. I define meaning as the form, nature, appearance, makeup, character, and/or essence of the thing in question, as it is to the one holding it, including but not limited to the thing that a person wants to convey when communicating, in contrast to things that result from misunderstanding or misinterpretation in the mind of the receiving person. Notice that this definition of meaning concerns semantic meaning, not teleological meaning. Also, notice that this definition of meaning does not require the word language, which is important if we want to avoid circular definitions. One can be in possession of meaning without explicating it through language or actions, as far as being in possession of something as vague as meaning is even sensible. Now, as you've noticed, I want to define the key concepts that I use. Defining is one of, if not the most central aspects of an explicated worldview. I also believe defining to be the most important aspect of language. Here is why. Language is a human invention. Not necessarily intentional, but still something that emerged from an organic psyche. Language was not granted to us by some dictionary of universal truths or an omniscient language teacher. Language emerged slowly as a trait of human beings throughout evolutionary history, and language has constantly evolved and changed. Language is acquired through socialization from people around us. A feral child will not be able to speak or understand language, and in most cases, will never be able to learn how to do so to the same extent as someone who was raised by people with language. All this points us to an important inference. Language is not perfect in what it aims to do, that is, to denote perceived thought or felt meaning. If language was perfect in what it aims to do, it would never change for the better, and we would never misunderstand what someone means when they speak. Language works as a representational system. This means that meaning is converted into symbols, like letters and words, kanji, or hand gestures, where the symbol represents the meaning. In a way, the symbol acts as an ID for the meaning. When a person holds a meaning that they want to convey, they convert the meaning into symbols, and then pass these symbols onto someone who attempts to convert the symbols back into meaning. And the ultimate goal would obviously be that the original meaning which the person wanted to convey didn't change at all during this process. When we successfully convert received symbols into an appropriate enough meaning, we call this understanding. But I contend that a perfectly successful conversion is impossible, or in other words, it's impossible to perfectly transform a meaning into a symbol or convert a symbol into its intended meaning. This is because no symbol, no matter how intricate and nuanced, ever holds the same properties as the meaning itself. That is to say, the meaning and the symbol are not and cannot be literally identical. And if they're not identical, then the conversion process is lossy. Meaning cannot be compressed into symbols without changing the meaning in some way, or losing something in the process. Symbolic representation is, in this manner, a foggy mirror which always distorts the meaning it attempts to reflect. It is always more or less ambiguous. Realizing this highlights the importance of defining words. If language, which relies on symbols, is by its nature lossy in terms of meaning conversion, then the least we can do is to minimize the loss of meaning by not assuming that the receiving side of a message knows perfectly what the symbols we use represent. Even if we cannot get to perfect precision, we can approach it by being as specific, rigorous, and thorough with words as possible. In this way, understanding is a spectrum, not a dichotomy. There's an extent to which someone can be understood more or less, although never perfectly. In light of this realization, if we aim towards an understanding communication, then haste in communication is a vice, even though it is often necessitated by our lack of time. If we want to understand each other, then we should take our time to settle all relevant semantic differences. What also becomes apparent is that any argument or a fight about what some word means is utterly pointless. We've all had these fights at some point. These kinds of arguments highlight how clueless we are by default about the workings of language. They show that we intuitively hold the belief that a word or some words must mean something by necessity. I call commonly accepted definitions conventional definitions, which is not to be confused with colloquial definitions. Conventional definitions are definitions which the majority of a population for any given language accept. Conventional definitions are necessary for a collectively shared language. The existence of conventional definitions doesn't, however, grant anyone a say in what any word truly or objectively means. A conventional definition is always a contract, an agreement, implemented for the sole purpose of communication. In reality, no symbol means anything by necessity. Anyone can use any symbol however they please. The only condition is that if you want to be understood, you must follow conventional definitions, or put in the time to explain how you define the words you use, or risk being heavily misunderstood. The problems with language don't end here, though. This problem with definitions, the lossy compression of meaning into symbols, is only a realization that leads to another important notion, that to define a word requires language, and in this sense, explicated symbols have no meaning outside other symbols. Symbols, or words in our case, use words to separate themselves from other words. The words used to define other words also have their own definitions. Ad infinitum. This leads to an infinite circular regress of definitions, which reveals that language is, indeed, separate from the world outside perception, instead of being a precise reflection of it. Language also relies on a process of categorization or classification, and it's an inherent property of language. It puts perceivable or imaginable things into classes, just like our perception does. This occurs because of a tendency in humans to perceive two or more things as discrete and different from each other, which I call discrety and will address extensively in my next video. The categorization, however, makes communicating what we think or perceive possible. It's very hard to imagine a language that doesn't rely on categorization. The problem with this property of language, however, is that the dividing line between the denotations of two or more unique non-synonymous words, no matter how seemingly far apart, is always arbitrary. In other words, the things that we refer to with words do not assemble into neat categories in reality, unlike our language would suggest to us. For example, you and I are both humans. I assume, unless you force your pet to listen to my rambling. However, upon closer inspection, what does it even mean to be a human? Is it the similarity in brain structure that lumps us together? Is it our DNA, shared history, or the ability to communicate? We could, in theory, look for more different factors that we share and don't share, and, if deemed valuable enough, lump ourselves together into one category based on one or more of those factors. This is how language categorizes, through perceived similarity and the value of that similarity to us. In simple terms, we perceive similarities between what we now call humans, and because those similarities are important to us, we place them into a category and give them a symbol, the word human. I will look deeper into the role of values in a worldview in yet another video. Subscribe if you want to catch that. Now, you might be thinking, what about abstract things? Yes, the issue becomes way more difficult as we inspect some very simple abstract words like the word one and the word two, which at face value seem to be obviously different things and therefore deserve unique words for themselves. But even with abstract words like one and two, the context in which these words are used in reveals that they, too, are to some degree arbitrarily differentiated from each other. Have you ever tried defining the word one, given we don't speak about a pronoun but a number? Most conventional definitions define one as the smallest integer, single unit, a single, half of two, the number denoting unity. What these definitions reveal is that even something that seems as simple as the abstract word one rely on definitions that do little more than rename the word. This is circular defining, and it highlights how devoid of meaning a word such as one is outside its applications. One is a symbol used in frequency systems like mathematics to serve the rules of mathematics, instead of denoting anything actual. One, like two, are therefore not things that exist on their own. They exist so that the rules of mathematics could be applied. You might be tempted to say that one apple, or any other object, is an obvious example for what one means. But an apple is not one thing, but a thing that consists of many things, parts, that constitute something that we merely perceive as a whole. An apple, or any external thing, is not a unity, but is in a constant flux, like everything in the universe. Now, I do need to make a disclaimer here. I'm not saying that math is arbitrary. In fact, math is, in principle, the opposite of arbitrary. Math is a form of language, a kind of language, just like conventional, everyday spoken language. Math is, however, a system of internal consistency. The aim of mathematics is unlike that of common language. Math aims to create rules that never break the rules of logic. It's a system for precision, an inerrant language that, regardless of whether the denotations of mathematics are actual, it cannot be internally invalid. Because of its linguistic precision, math is extremely useful when used alongside everyday language. It compensates for the ambiguity of everyday language by lending its insurmountable precision to it. Mathematical symbols are, however, applicable only within the rules of mathematics themselves. And outside their application, mathematical symbols are meaningless. In other words, math works because mathematical symbols are used precisely according to the rules and definitions created for them, so that they can be applied within the system itself. You could say that it's a game. And just like with chess, the king piece is only a king within the game of chess, not outside of it. Finally, I want to highlight what problematizing the meaning of a simple word looks like. Think of the word up. To many, up seems to be a very understandable word, and suffice to say, the word works in most situations. But if we begin with the attitude that language reflects objective reality, we realize upon closer inspection that the word up is arbitrary as well. Up from where? If you imagine a situation with two people standing on the opposite sides of a planet, these people have a different up, where the up of one person means almost the same thing as the down of the other person. Even if they use the same word, the objective outcome is different. This is a very crude and simple example, but it highlights how even antonyms can be objectively synonymous after a meaning conversion. This problem reveals that language is always contextual, within the language itself and within the situation in which it is used. Words depend on understanding of other words, as well as the situation in which they are used, to have explicit meaning. This idea can be extended to most situations where we attempt to understand others. Unless we have the full picture of where a person comes from, what they say can never be understood perfectly. However, I want to emphasize again that understanding is a spectrum. By asking questions about relevant issues, we can gain a better understanding of what a person truly means. And quite often, the most relevant question is to ask for a definition for the symbols a person uses. These problems that I've highlighted so far point to the same conclusion that I already made earlier, that we cannot assume that we perfectly understand what someone means when they use language, or that the language we use is perfectly understood by its recipient. Because words never reflect the meaning they aim to convey perfectly. If you're not yet convinced that the problems that I've highlighted are real, don't worry. I will provide more examples in my future videos that display these issues. In philosophical terms, one could say that this video acts partly as a rationale for the conceptualist position regarding the problem of universals, opposing the position of conceptual realism. And this video also aims to highlight the implications of this notion. Universals cannot be demonstrated to exist as externals, only as mental concepts that reflect the categorizing nature of human perception. In other words, universals are perception-bound. In addition, this video aims to demonstrate that even though only particulars exist, they cannot be precisely referred to with language. Words always distort the particular in question or fail to convey its nature perfectly, which is exacerbated in communication. Instead of reflecting external reality, language reflects the operations of the human mind. The following videos will deal with this topic in further detail, but from the perspective of human perception. To summarize, the fundamental problem with language is that it creates boundaries into a world that doesn't have boundaries. We humans understand reality through categorization. The brain is a pattern-seeking apparatus. This is again reflected in language. Every word seeks to differentiate one thing from another, and its function is to help thinking about or communicate the perceived differentiations to those who use the same language. However, when thoroughly and mercilessly examined, no word can reach its denotation perfectly. Or in other words, we cannot use words to transmit meaning as it is, but instead are forced to accept a more or less blurry version of that meaning. Words are merely placeholders for something more refined with more fidelity. Once you inspect this property of language through its ultimate goal, which is perfect representation of what is meant, you realize that language is, for the time being, but a foggy mirror. This doesn't mean that language cannot be used to express meaning, or that no word is accurate when conveying meaning, but that the conversion process from symbol to meaning and meaning to symbol is always imprecise and uncertain. Ironically, and perhaps even paradoxically, the whole point of this video was to try to help you understand why and how language is unreliable and arbitrary by using language. If you stuck around till the very end, thank you. If you enjoy content like this and you want to support me, consider subscribing. Stay sane and see you next time.